Komets Corner is presented by Lee's Famous Recipe.
It feels good to officially say it. Komets have clinched a playoff spot. They are going to the ECHL postseason. He, of course, is Shane Albahrani. I'm Glenn Marini, and here is Komets Corner, brought to you by Lee's Famous Recipe Chicken. And Shane, once this team clinched on Friday night and could officially put their eyes toward the postseason, what was the vibe around this team clinching in Bloomington on this past Friday night?
Well, you know what? We lost the game, so it really wasn't a good vibe. You know, it was nice that you got to clinch it, but you got your point. But at the end of the day, you still took the L. So yeah, you know, they were happy to obviously get their spot, but there was still work to be done on Saturday night, and they were able to answer the bell in the return match there at the Coliseum against Bloomington. So now the Komets can start looking towards the postseason, and you know, 62 times the Komets have made the playoffs. That's more than any other team in any North American sport. That's more than anybody in the NFL, the NHL, the NBA, the AHL. It is a tremendous accomplishment when you really look at that number. 62 times since 1952 is crazy.
That is a lot of hockey.
Yeah.
A lot of bonus hockey. So when you take a look at this Komets team, we got 7 games still left in the regular season, over 2 weeks, 4 games this week, including a game on Tuesday at Kalamazoo. Going forward, what do you want to see for this team? Because they have that playoff berth in the back pocket, what are you looking forward to see from this Komets team to say, okay, we're ready for a big postseason run?
Yeah, you know, the Komets are in a little bit of a situation here on the roster side of things because you've got 5 guys up in the AHL who are performing really well in Bakersfield, and Bakersfield is in the heat of a playoff race themselves. Right now, as we speak, they're a point up with a game at hand of the final playoff spot in the Pacific Division, and Kyle Mayhew and Darren Brady and Ethan Kepp and now Brett Brochu, who's won 2 games up in Bakersfield. You know what? They're carrying right now this Bakersfield squad into the playoffs. So if they do indeed make the playoffs, it's going to be interesting for the Komets because there's no guarantee that we get these guys back. So right now, it's almost training camp starting all over again in October. You know, you bring more guys in. You know, we were on that 7-game road trip, and there were guys who were with us and then let go, and then you're bringing 2 new guys in, and so it's now a different, or 3 guys, including a goaltender. So yeah, you know what? It's back to training camp. You know, they kind of have to take this time that they've got their spot. You're still fighting for home ice, but you're in good shape. You got a 6-point lead on Iowa and the tiebreaker, so you can kind of take your time a little bit here and make sure you have all your line combinations and the chemistry right, because there's no guarantee that you're going to get a Kyle Mayhew or an Ethan Keppen back. And right now, Brett Brochu right now is a question mark too.
Yeah, that was my next question, is Brett Brochu. That's what Komets fans are wondering. Connor Unger has certainly played very well, and a lot. He's improved quite a bit since we saw him at the beginning of the season to where he's at now. So you have to feel a little more comfortable with him in goal than maybe you were 3, 4, 5 months ago.
No, absolutely. You know, he's arguably the most improved player on this team. He was shaky the first couple months of the season, but you know, he had a turning point. You know, he had a bad game going into the Christmas break, game down in Indy where the Komets lost 4-1. But then Brett Brochu got the flu coming back out of the Christmas break, and he got 3 straight starts. He won all 3 games, and that was the weekend he really became a pro hockey player, and he has just been lights out the rest since that. So no, full confidence in Unger going forward here. But you know, Brett Brochu has been the guy. You know, you could make your argument that he's the MVP of this team. So you know, it all depends on what happens with Stuart Skinner up in Edmonton. I read that, you know, it may be another week, so that would force him back to Fort Wayne, but we don't know. You know, it's a big time question mark right now.
All right, so a couple of the guys that they've added to the roster in recent weeks, we're talking about Blake Murray and Kyle Krankovic. Obviously, guys that are offensive weapons, and we've already seen it during their short time thus far with the Komets. We had a chance to chat with them at practice last week, and here's what Murray and Krankovic both had to say.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It was all happened pretty quick. I mean, I got here, and the next day we were heading to Wheeling and Indy, so didn't have much time to adjust. But the guys welcomed me, and obviously a great team, so it was pretty easy to fit in. Yeah, I think offensively I could help, and obviously, I mean, trying to play a 2-way game. And I think as soon as I got here, I mean, the whole team is on the same page, so it was nice to just jump on ship and join what they got. Yeah, I'm really excited. I mean, as a road team, it's always been tough building to come in with the fans and you know, the way it gets rocking. So, you know, to play on the other side and be on the home side, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm a 200-foot player. I can provide some offense, play some minutes, and just looking forward to being here for the playoff run, like you said, and hopefully going on a run here. Yeah, I've actually never played in this building before, so I'm really excited. I've heard a lot of great things, and I heard it's going to be rocking, and they get a lot of good fans, and I'm looking forward to Saturday.
It's a lot of moving parts, a lot of guys going up and down, trade deadline obviously, picking up Murray and Craig Colvick were big things for us too, so now it's we got our group, now we're trying to figure out where everybody fits.
All right, Jesse Kalicki in this club, 7 games left, but we're going to take a look back before we take a look forward because Friday night with the clincher in Bloomington, as you mentioned, this team, they got the 1 point. They would have rather had 2, but let's take a look at some of those highlights from Friday night as the K's go to Bloomington for a little home and home with the Thunder this past weekend. When you take a look at this Komets team, on Friday night, kind of what was the vibe going into this game for the K's because they knew, okay, they had Sunday off and they were going to be back home on Saturday night. Like, we can go all out on Friday, right?
I know the mentality was to win the game. Absolutely. So the vibe wasn't that great getting on the bus because, yes, you did clinch your spot, but at the end of the day, you lost the game. So, happy about that. But they responded nicely coming back and getting a win on Saturday. But it's just a little bit of the problems where we're seeing, different line combinations right now. Like I mentioned, it's kind of like training camp all over again. The Komets with 3 straight games, only scoring 1 goal. Wasn't for a lack of effort, but, you just don't get the bounces. And that's the way it goes some nights. But again, nice bounce back game on Saturday. You put 3 in the back of the net early. There were also really pretty goals that looked really nice. They weren't the garbage goals, but so I kind of saw a little different flow on Saturday than I did on Friday.
I was going to say that Albahrani goal to Blake Murray was the thing of beauty on Friday night.
Yeah, it certainly was. Blake Murray, he's a great addition because he's a pure centerman, which is something the Komets have not had since Odin Tufto was down with an injury. So he was much needed, and a guy who's a good skill guy, and especially with Alex Albahrani, who can score and distribute. Having a compliment to him is going to be a big help.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. I've been talking to Komets fans over the last week, and they were wondering about Odin Tufto. I'm glad you brought that name up because that was a good question that they wanted me to ask was, what is the status with him? Obviously, he's got the arm injury. We haven't seen him in a while. A good centerman, as we've talked about many times on this show. Great on the face-off, which can be huge to steal a possession, especially in the postseason coming up. Odin Tufto, where are we with him?
He's still working his way back. Last I heard, we were hoping to get him back maybe for the last weekend of the season, the 2 games against Bloomington at home. That was the last status, but he is skating. He is puck handling, but with the crowded roster right now, you can take your time. You get Blake Murray, he's the centerman. You've got a lot of guys filling in on that 3rd line. Anthony Petrozelli, Jack Gorniak. Nick Deacon-Poot has done wonderful in that spot since he has been gone. So you can kind of take your time, make sure he is indeed ready, but he's going to want to get some reps in before we hit the playoffs.
All right, so let's take a look at Saturday's highlights because the Komets come back home. It felt weird probably for them to be back home, but you're talking about over 10,000 fans on a Saturday night in the regular season at the end of March coming out for a game. And like you said, some pretty goals, some good hockey played by the Komets in this victory, 3-2.
Yeah, no, they were pretty goals, especially that first one that Noah Gansky scored, and then the one from Kirill Tatayev and Jack Gorniak. They've got something special working there. It's Jack Gorniak, to me, is the most dynamic player in the league. And if you're an opposing team looking at number 20, he is going to be a factor in the playoffs. He's a guy who's quietly picked up 15 goals. Honestly, he should have about 10 more. But he's a guy who I'm really looking forward to seeing in his first postseason.
Jack Gorniak, to me, he's like a wide receiver in football that could break a 70-yard touchdown on occasion, like a game breaker type of guy, or a home run hitter that can really change the course of a game like that.
Yeah, absolutely. You can put him in any situation. He's one of the best penalty killers in the league. I would say he's probably the fastest skater in the league. So like you said, that analogy with the wide receiver, you can't teach speed. So he can break a game open at any given moment. And when you got guys like Kirill Tatayev and Alex Albahrani who can skate with them, then they become a very deadly combination.
when you see this team, didn't have a Sunday game, so you probably had a wild time on the town. But having a little bit of rest heading into a 4-game week with Tuesday being on the road against Kalamazoo, how did this team feel after the weekend? You mentioned they weren't exactly thrilled, even though they clinched on Friday night with getting the point instead of winning on the road against Bloomington in OT. But after playing, they were up 3-0 in this game. They let Bloomington back in it a little and ended up winning 3-2. But what was the attitude? What was the locker room like? What was, I keep saying the word vibe, but it's just such a great word. What was the vibe around this team? Having won on Saturday night in front of 10,000 people and getting ready for the home stretch with these 7 games left in the regular season.
Yeah, I think it was a relief. The Komets have had a so-so record against huge crowds this season at home. So to come out and get a win and, like you said, you're up 3-0, kind of the nightmare scenario played out. So you give up one early, then you take a penalty a minute later. They get another one. Now it's 3-2. And then you had a 5-minute major you had to kill off. So that third period was pretty intense, but they were able to get the win. And now, yeah, you got 4 games. The schedule maker is not being very easy on us here. So you got Kalamazoo, who is now desperate. I mean, they are, I believe they're 3 points back now of Bloomington and Indy for the 4th playoff spot. So come Tuesday night, it's going to be a war for them up in Kalamazoo. And then you're going to play Indy back-to-back nights and Cincinnati. And then you're going to finish up, you got to go to Toledo, and then you got 2 games against Bloomington. So the Komets are very much going to decide who Toledo is going to play in that first round, because it was a big loss for Bloomington, but everyone else lost below them on Saturday night. So, yeah, it's going to be a battle. Every game is basically a playoff game. But again, the Komets, they're trying to get home ice advantage, but they're also juggling the fact that they don't have some big guns in their lineup right now.
That's a good way to put it, is that everything is going to be a playoff game for the next couple of weeks. Let's take a look at the standings, because you alluded perfectly, a great segue, professional television here, that Kalamazoo is only 3 points behind both Bloomington and Indy. Cincinnati's still in it with 60 points and 66 games played. But as you mentioned, there's a little more stratification now at the top when we look at Toledo with 93 points and only 5 games left to play, while the K's have 83 points, 7 games left, and Iowa 65 games played, 77 points. So there's a little bit of spacing at the top where it looks like, unless something absolutely insane happens, we've got the 1, 2, 3, and it's just really the 4th spot when it comes to the Central Division. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And it's going to be fun to see who gets that final spot, because, like you said, Cincinnati's still in it. Everybody went outside of the division this weekend. Indy had a chance. They lost 2 games out in Adirondack. So Cincinnati, they played Wheeling, and Bloomington played the Komets and went to Wheeling and lost. So, it's going to be a fun ride for those teams. Not so much for us because we got to play them, but the Komets are in a good spot. They got 6 points up on Iowa. You got the tiebreaker. Hopefully you'll get that home ice. I believe the magic number is now 8 points over the last 7 games for the Komets. So, it's going to be fun because we're still playing for something, even though we're in the playoffs. But again, it's getting the chemistry down, because you have no idea what this lineup is going to be on game 1 of the Kelly Cup playoffs.
I do not want to ask the typical question of who do you want to play in the playoffs, because that just gives bulletin board material for somebody else. Like, who would you want to make the 4th spot so that if they beat Toledo, and who you would, I don't even want to get into that, because that's asking for trouble. I've done this enough that I don't want to ask that question. But leading into this week, what do you want to see from the Komets here, especially on Tuesday night as you go into this week, that will tell you that this team is ready for the postseason, even with all those moving parts and a roster that's in flux at this time?
Yeah, right now it's just chemistry. Again, we're kind of going back to training camp with all the new faces here and guys, and plus, you could get all these guys back at one time. You just don't know. So I don't envy the coaching staff right now, because they don't know really, not even day to day. It's hour to hour at this point who's going to be in the lineup. But you know what? I like the pickups. Owen Gallatin played in his first pro game. He was not shy at the blue line. Coach Kalicki put him out there on the blue line during the power play, and so I really kind of look forward to see what he brings to the table here. Blake Murray is just starting to get his feet, even though he's got a couple of goals already, but he's only been with the team here for a couple of weeks. So again, it's just chemistry here, and they got to remember where the gas pedal is, because even though you got your playoff spot, you're playing for home ice, you still want to go in on a winning streak. You still want to be hot going into the playoffs.
All right, let's take a look at this week's final schedule, as we have 1 week and then another week, and then it's the postseason. But this is the last 4-game week. I don't know. Do you play 4 games in a week in the playoffs?
Yes, you can.
I was going to say, it can
yeah.
happen. It's probably based on, whether out the arenas are available.
Yeah, it's building
or not.
availability. So the playoffs, it's kind of a wacky schedule sometimes, but you got to get them in. So
yeah. So this might not be the last 4-game week of the season. But at Kalamazoo on Tuesday, Friday home versus Indy, then at Indy on Saturday, and then back home against Cincinnati on Sunday. When you take a look at some of these teams, if you had to pick one of those games that you're excited about, which would that be? A chance to go down to Indy, maybe, and win one, and maybe put Indy out of the playoffs. I don't want to say it, but
right there. You don't. It's always, if you can't play in the playoffs, it's always nice to put the rival out of the playoffs. So no, those 2 games, a home and home at Indy, I mean that's going to be just must-watch TV. So get to the Coliseum and come on out Friday night and see that game. But tell you what, tomorrow night up in Kalamazoo is going to be a war, because no one else is playing. Kalamazoo needs those 2 points desperately. They're 3 points back. So and they just got Ty Young back from Vancouver. So I would guess he's going to be in goal. So tomorrow night is going to be a big game up in Kalamazoo.
Final question: does it seem surreal that there are only 7 games left in the regular season? How weird is that? Does it go by so fast?
Yeah, you know what, it does. It really does, especially in the month of March. It seems like we're coming to the end, but then I look, I'm like, 7 games, that's still a lot of hockey to be played. So
True.
Yeah, so now that you've got your spot, I'm kind of like, all right, let's get to the playoffs, but you know what, we still got a lot to play for. So.
And we got a lot to talk about, and we will do that right here on Komets Corner next Monday. For this week, he's Shane, I'm Glenn, and we'll see you next week talking Komets hockey.
Komets Corner is presented by Lee's Famous Recipe.